Michael Harrison stepped out of his black Tesla, rain hammering against his expensive jacket as he rushed toward the Meridian Hotel entrance. 3 steps from the revolving door, he nearly tripped over something that shouldn't have been there. A woman sat huddled against the building's marble facade, soaked through and shivering. Her dark hair hung in wet strings around her face, but when she looked up, her green eyes held an intelligence that stopped him cold. "I'm sorry," she said, scrambling to move aside. "I didn't mean to block your way." The accent caught his attention immediately. Not the rough edges he expected from someone sleeping rough, but educated, refined. "Like money. Are you hurt?" he asked, extending his hand without thinking. She hesitated before taking it, her fingers ice-cold against his palm. "No, just waiting for the rain to ease up." Michael glanced at the storm clouds rolling in from the west. This wasn't letting up anytime soon. "When did you last eat?" "I'm fine, really. You should go inside before you catch pneumonia." Something about the way she deflected his question made his chest tighten. He'd seen plenty of people down on their luck in Portland, but none who spoke like they'd graduated from an Ivy League school. "Come on," he said, keeping hold of her hand. "Let's get you dried off." "I can't afford." "I'm buying." No strings attached. Emily Carter stared at this stranger who'd materialized out of the storm like some kind of guardian angel. 6 months ago, she would have laughed at the irony. Now, running from her own family with nothing but the clothes on her back, she was too exhausted to argue. The hotel lobby enveloped them in warmth and soft jazz music. Emily tried not to gawk at the crystal chandeliers and marble floors that probably cost more than most people's cars. The concierge's eyes tracked her wet sneakers across the pristine carpet, but he said nothing when Michael approached. "I need a room for the night," Michael said, pulling out his Black American Express card. "Something with a good view." "Of course, Mr. Harrison. The penthouse suite is available." Emily's stomach dropped. Harrison. She'd heard that name whispered in her father's study during heated phone calls, always followed by curses and threats about hostile takeovers. If this man was who she thought he was, she needed to leave. Now. But her legs wouldn't move. 3 days of sleeping in doorways and eating from vending machines had left her lightheaded and weak. "Actually," Michael said, glancing at her pale face, "make that 2 rooms. Adjoining, if you have them." "Sir, I really can't." "You can and you will." His voice carried an authority that suggested he wasn't used to being argued with. No one should be out in this weather. 20 minutes later, Emily stood in a bathroom that was larger than her college dorm room, staring at herself in the mirror. The hotel had provided a fluffy robe and slippers, and someone had delivered a bag of clothes in her size without her asking. The efficiency was both impressive and terrifying. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. "Emily? I ordered room service. Hope you like chicken soup." She opened the door to find him standing there with a concerned expression, no longer the commanding businessman from the lobby, just a man who'd noticed someone in trouble and decided to help. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "Would you believe me if I said I don't know?" The honesty in his voice caught her off guard. She'd spent the last 3 days assuming every person who looked at her twice had ulterior motives, but something about Michael Harrison felt different, dangerous in an entirely new way. They ate in comfortable silence, the storm raging against the floor-to-ceiling windows. Emily tried not to think about how normal this felt, how easy it would be to pretend she was just a regular person sharing dinner with an attractive man instead of a fugitive hiding from her own family. "You're not from around here," Michael said eventually. "What gave it away?" "Your accent. New England money, if I had to guess." Emily's spoon froze halfway to her mouth. "You're very perceptive. Part of the job. I deal with a lot of people who aren't exactly who they claim to be." The words hung in the air between them, loaded with implications Emily didn't dare explore. She set down her spoon and stood, suddenly needing distance. "I should go? Thank you for dinner and the room, but I can't stay. It's past midnight, and there's a flood warning in effect. I've managed this long." "Have you?" Michael stood as well, moving closer. "Because you look like you haven't slept in days." He was right, and they both knew it. Emily felt tears threatening and hated herself for the weakness. She'd promised herself she wouldn't cry anymore, wouldn't let Ryan's threats and manipulations break her down. "Hey," Michael said softly, reaching out to touch her cheek. "Whatever you're running from, it doesn't have to catch you tonight." The gentleness in his voice nearly undid her completely. When was the last time someone had spoken to her like she mattered? Like she was worth protecting? Before she could think better of it, she leaned into his touch. He stepped closer, his other hand coming up to frame her face, and suddenly the space between them disappeared entirely. The kiss was soft at first, tentative, but when Emily's hands fisted in his shirt, something shifted. 6 months of fear and loneliness poured out of her, met by a hunger in him that spoke of his own carefully hidden isolation. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Emily felt the first crack in the walls she'd built around her heart. "I don't even know your last name," she whispered. "Harrison," he said. "Michael Harrison." Emily's blood turned to ice. Emily pulled away from Michael as if he'd struck her. Harrison. The name echoed in her mind like a death knell, bringing with it every poisonous word her father had ever spoken about the Harrison family. "Is something wrong?" Michael asked, his hand still reaching for her. "I need to go." Emily backed toward the door, her heart hammering against her ribs. "Right now?" "Emily, wait. What just happened?" But she was already grabbing her still damp clothes from the bathroom, her mind racing. Of all the people in Portland, of all the doorways she could have chosen to shelter in, she'd stumbled into the arms of her family's greatest enemy. The irony would have been laughable if it wasn't so terrifying. "Please don't leave like this," Michael said, blocking her path to the door. "At least tell me what I did wrong." Emily stared at him, taking in the genuine confusion in his blue eyes. He had no idea who she was. To him, she was just some homeless woman he'd rescued from the storm. The thought should have been comforting, but instead it made everything worse. "You didn't do anything wrong," she said quietly. "That's the problem." Before he could respond, she slipped past him and out the door, leaving behind the warmth and safety of the suite for the harsh fluorescent lighting of the hotel corridor. She made it exactly 3 floors down before exhaustion won. Emily sank onto a bench in the hotel's business center, her wet clothes clinging uncomfortably to her skin. Outside, the storm raged on with no signs of letting up. Running again wouldn't solve anything. She had nowhere to go, no money, and Ryan's private investigators were probably already combing the city for her. Maybe staying close to Michael Harrison was actually the smartest move she could make. Who would think to look for a Carter in the enemy's bed? The thought made her stomach turn, but desperation bred strange bedfellows. When she returned to the suite 20 minutes later, Michael was pacing by the windows, still fully dressed despite the late hour. "I thought you'd left for good," he said, relief flooding his voice. "I considered it, but you're right about the storm." Emily set her damp clothes aside and pulled the hotel robe tighter around herself. "I'm sorry for running off like that. I'm not very good at accepting help." Michael studied her face, clearly sensing there was more to the story. Bad experiences with people who wanted something in return. Something like that. He nodded, not pushing for details she wasn't ready to give. "The offer stands. Room, food, whatever you need until you get back on your feet." "And what would you want in return?" "Honestly, I don't know yet. Maybe just the company of someone who doesn't want anything from me." Emily almost laughed at the bitter irony. If only he knew exactly how much she represented everything he should want to destroy. They spent the rest of the night talking carefully around the edges of their real lives. Emily learned that Michael had built his tech company from nothing, that he worked 18-hour days because going home to an empty penthouse was worse than sleeping at the office. Michael learned that Emily had been educated at private schools, that she spoke 3 languages, and that she'd been traveling for the past year before running into some unspecified trouble. Both of them lied by omission, crafting careful truths that revealed nothing important. When morning came, Michael made an offer that should have sent Emily running again. "I need a new assistant," he said over coffee and croissants from room service. "Someone smart, educated, capable of thinking on their feet. The pay is good, and it comes with housing in the company apartments." Emily nearly choked on her coffee. "You want to hire me? You don't even know my last name." "Carter," she said without thinking, then immediately regretted it. "Emily Carter." Michael tested the name, his expression thoughtful. "Have we met before? Something about you seems familiar." Emily's blood froze. Carter Industries had been Harrison Tech's primary competitor for over a decade. If he connected her to that Carter family, her protective anonymity would evaporate instantly. "I have one of those faces," she said lightly. "People always think they know me from somewhere." Michael seemed to accept this explanation, but Emily caught him studying her profile when he thought she wasn't looking. How long before he put the pieces together? 2 weeks later, Emily found herself sitting in a glass-walled conference room 30 floors above downtown Portland, taking notes while Michael negotiated a multi-million-dollar acquisition. She'd fallen into the role of his assistant with alarming ease, her expensive education finally proving useful for something other than cocktail party small talk. Living in the company apartments and working closely with Michael had created an intimacy that terrified her. She knew how he liked his coffee, that he stayed late every Thursday to video call his sister in Boston, that he sometimes stood at his office windows and stared out at the city with an expression of profound loneliness. Worse, she'd started to understand why her father had feared him so much. Michael Harrison wasn't just intelligent and ruthless in business. He was also kind to his employees, generous with his success, and completely dedicated to creating technology that actually helped people instead of just generating profit. Everything her father had told her about the Harrison family was proving to be lies built on jealousy and old grudges. "Emily," Michael said as the meeting ended and the other executives filed out. "Could you stay for a moment?" Her stomach clenched. Had he finally figured out who she was? "I wanted to thank you," he said when they were alone. "These past 2 weeks, you've made my life significantly easier. And not just professionally." He moved closer, close enough that she could smell his cologne and see the gold flecks in his blue eyes. "I know we agreed this would be strictly business, but I can't stop thinking about that night at the hotel." Neither could Emily, despite knowing how dangerous those thoughts were. "Michael, I know you're still healing from whatever brought you to my doorstep. I'm not asking you to rush into anything. I just want you to know that when you're ready, I'd like to explore what this could be." Emily's heart hammered as he reached up to touch her cheek, the same gentle gesture that had undone her defenses 2 weeks ago. She should step away, should remind him of all the professional boundaries they'd established. Instead, she found herself leaning into his touch. The kiss that followed was different from their first. No longer desperate and afraid, but warm and full of promise. Emily let herself get lost in it for just a moment, pretending she was someone else, someone who deserved the tenderness Michael was offering. When they broke apart, his phone buzzed with an urgent message. Emily glanced at the screen and felt her world tilt sideways. The message was from building security, accompanied by a photo that made her blood run cold. A tall man with dark hair and cold eyes stood in the lobby, demanding to see Michael Harrison about his missing sister. Ryan Carter had found her. Emily stared at Ryan's photo on Michael's phone screen, her hands trembling as she handed the device back to him. 3 weeks of safety, of pretending she could have a normal life, shattered in an instant. "Do you know him?" Michael asked, studying her pale face. "My brother," Emily said, the half-truth burning her throat. "I told you I was running from family problems." Michael's expression hardened immediately. "What kind of problems?" Before Emily could answer, his assistant's voice crackled through the intercom. "Mr. Harrison, there's a Ryan Carter here to see you. He says it's about his sister Emily." Emily closed her eyes, feeling the walls of her carefully constructed new life crumbling around her. "Don't see him. Please." "Why not? If he's your brother and he's worried about you." "He's not worried. He's angry." Emily grabbed Michael's arm, desperation making her bold. "You don't understand what he's capable of." Michael covered her hand with his touch steady and reassuring. "Then help me understand. What happened between you two?" Emily wanted to tell him everything. About the inheritance, about Ryan's threats, about the growing certainty that her adoptive brother had killed their father for money. But how could she explain any of that without revealing who she really was? "Tell security I'm in meetings all day," Michael said into the intercom. "And call building security to escort Mr. Carter from the premises if he refuses to leave." Emily sagged with relief, but she knew this was only a temporary reprieve. Ryan wouldn't give up that easily. They left the office through the executive parking garage, Michael's hand protectively on her lower back as they walked to his car. Emily tried to focus on the warmth of his touch instead of the fear clawing at her chest. "We're going to my house," Michael said as they drove through downtown Portland. "He can't get past the gate without an invitation." Emily nodded, staring out at the familiar streets. She'd driven these same roads countless times growing up, back when she was Emily Carter, daughter of Carter Industries, instead of Emily the runaway assistant. Michael's house sat on 3 acres in the West Hills, a modern masterpiece of glass and steel that managed to feel warm despite its size. Emily had been here twice before for work dinners, but seeing it now as a refuge made everything feel different. "Tell me about your family," Michael said once they were settled in his living room with glasses of wine. "What made you run?" Emily stared into the fire crackling in the fireplace, choosing her words carefully. "My father died 6 months ago. Ryan inherited control of the family business, and he wanted me to marry someone I couldn't stand. When I refused, things got ugly. It was true enough, even if it left out the most important details." "How ugly?" Michael's voice carried a dangerous edge. "Threats. He said if I didn't do what he wanted, he'd make sure I had nothing left. No money, no home, no family." Emily set down her wine glass with shaking hands. "So I left with whatever I could carry." Michael moved closer on the couch, pulling her against his side. "You should have told me this weeks ago. I could have helped, protected you." "From what?" "He hasn't done anything illegal. He's just a manipulative bastard who thinks he owns me." "What's the name of your family business?" Emily's heart stopped. "Why?" "Because if Ryan Carter thinks he can threaten someone under my protection, he's about to learn exactly how wrong he is." The protective fury in Michael's voice made Emily's chest tight with emotions she couldn't afford to feel. She was falling for him, had been falling for weeks, and it was going to destroy them both. "It doesn't matter," she said quietly. "I don't want anything from that life anymore." Michael tilted her chin up, his blue eyes intense in the firelight. "You matter to me, Emily. More than I probably should admit after only 3 weeks." The confession hung between them, heavy with implications Emily didn't dare explore. She should pull away, should maintain the professional distance they'd both been pretending still existed. Instead, she found herself leaning closer. "Michael, I know this complicates things. I know there are a dozen reasons why this is a bad idea." His thumb traced along her jawline. "But I've never felt this way about anyone before." Emily's resolve crumbled completely. She'd spent 3 weeks telling herself that the growing attraction between them was just gratitude mixed with proximity. But sitting here in his arms, seeing the vulnerability he usually kept hidden, she couldn't lie to herself anymore. She loved him. She loved Michael Harrison, and it was going to ruin everything. "I love you too," she whispered, the words escaping before she could stop them. Michael's kiss was fierce and desperate, as if he'd been waiting weeks to hear those words. Emily lost herself in the warmth of his mouth, the strength of his arms around her, the way he held her like she was something precious. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, reality came crashing back. Emily loved Michael Harrison, but she was Emily Carter. Their families had been enemies for longer than either of them had been alive. Even if Ryan weren't hunting her, even if she could tell Michael the truth about who she was, there was no future for them. "I have to go," she said, pulling away from his embrace. "What?" "Emily, what's wrong?" But she was already standing, grabbing her purse and heading for the door. "I'm sorry. I can't do this." "Emily, wait." She didn't stop, couldn't stop, because if she looked at his face, she'd lose her nerve completely. Better to hurt him now than to destroy him later when the truth inevitably came out. Emily made it halfway down the driveway before the tears started falling. Behind her, she could hear Michael calling her name, but she kept walking into the darkness. She'd gotten 6 blocks from his house when a black sedan pulled up beside her. Emily's heart sank as the passenger window rolled down, revealing Ryan's cold smile. "Hello, sister. We need to talk." 3 hours later, Emily sat in her old bedroom at the Carter estate, staring at the phone in her hands. Ryan had given her a choice: send Michael a text breaking things off permanently, or watch him die in what would look like a very tragic car accident. With shaking fingers, Emily typed the message that would shatter both their hearts. "I'm sorry, but I used you. I never loved you. Please don't try to find me." She hit send and closed her eyes, feeling the last piece of her heart break into dust. In his empty house across town, Michael stared at the message on his phone screen, the words blurring as something fundamental shifted inside his chest. He'd been a fool to believe someone like Emily could actually love someone like him. But even as he told himself he should be angry, should write her off as just another opportunist, something about the message felt wrong. Emily's voice in his head, saying, "I love you too," with tears in her eyes, didn't match the cold dismissal on his screen. Michael Harrison hadn't built a tech empire by accepting things at face value, and he wasn't about to start now. Michael spent 3 sleepless days trying to convince himself that Emily's message was real. He threw himself into work, took meetings he normally would have delegated, and stayed at the office until security had to escort him out. But every time he closed his eyes, he saw her face in the firelight, heard her whispered confession of love. Something was wrong. Emily Carter might be many things, but she wasn't a liar. At least not about this. On Thursday evening, Michael made a decision that would have seemed insane a week ago. He drove to the Carter estate in Forest Grove, a sprawling mansion he'd passed countless times but never had reason to visit. The irony of seeking answers at a house that belonged to a family with the same last name as Emily wasn't lost on him. Security at the gate was heavier than he'd expected for a private residence. 2 guards, cameras, and electronic locks that wouldn't have looked out of place at a government facility. Michael gave them his real name and said he was there to see Emily Carter about a business matter. 20 minutes later, the gates opened. Ryan Carter met him at the front door, all polished charm and calculating eyes. "Mr. Harrison, what an unexpected pleasure. I understand you're looking for my sister." Michael studied the man's face, searching for any resemblance to Emily. The bone structure was similar, but where Emily's features held warmth and intelligence, Ryan's held cold ambition. "She worked for me briefly," Michael said carefully. "Left some important documents behind." "I'm sure she did. Emily has always been careless about details." Ryan's smile never reached his eyes. "Unfortunately, she's not available right now. Family business, you understand." "When will she be available?" "Hard to say. She's had some personal issues lately. Delusions about people caring for her, romantic fantasies about men who are completely wrong for her." Ryan's voice carried a subtle threat. "We're helping her work through those problems." Michael's hands clenched into fists. "I'd like to speak with her directly." "I'm afraid that's not possible. Emily is quite fragile right now. Seeing you would only upset her more." Every instinct Michael possessed screamed that Emily was in this house, probably against her will. But charging in without proof would accomplish nothing except getting himself arrested. "Tell her I stopped by," Michael said, turning to leave. "And that if she needs anything at all, she knows how to reach me. Of course, though I wouldn't expect to hear from her. Emily has finally accepted that her little adventure is over." Michael drove away slowly, his mind racing. Emily wasn't at that house by choice, he was certain of it. But proving it would require resources he didn't have immediately available. He was wrong about the resources part. 3 blocks from the Carter estate, Michael's phone rang. The caller ID showed a number he didn't recognize, but the voice on the other end made his heart stop. "Michael." Emily's whisper was barely audible over what sounded like wind. "I only have a few minutes. Ryan took my phone, but I found an old one in my room." "Where are you? Are you hurt?" "I'm at the estate, but not for long. Ryan's planning to move me tomorrow to somewhere more secure." Emily's voice cracked. "That message I sent you, it wasn't real. I would never." "I know. I knew something was wrong." Michael was already turning his car around. "I'm coming to get you." "No, it's too dangerous. The security here is military grade, and Ryan has connections everywhere. If you try to come here, he'll have you killed." "Then how do I help you?" "You can't. This is bigger than you know, Michael. My family and yours have history, bad history. If Ryan finds out about us, about how I feel about you." The line went dead. Michael stared at his phone, Emily's words echoing in his mind. Her family and has had history? What kind of history? It took him less than an hour to find his answer. Carter Industries. The same Carter Industries that had been Harrison Tech's biggest competitor for over a decade. The same Carter Industries whose CEO had died 6 months ago under suspicious circumstances. Emily Carter wasn't just some educated runaway. She was William Carter's daughter, heir to a fortune that rivaled his own, and quite possibly the most important person in his enemy's organization. Michael should have felt betrayed, should have been furious that she deceived him so completely. Instead, all he felt was a desperate need to get her away from whatever Ryan Carter was planning. He spent the next 2 days planning Emily's extraction with the precision he usually reserved for hostile takeovers. Private security consultants, surveillance equipment, and enough legal pressure to make Ryan Carter think twice about retaliating. The plan was supposed to take effect on Saturday morning. Emily beat him to it by escaping on Friday night. Michael found her standing in his living room at midnight, soaked from another Portland rainstorm and shaking with exhaustion. She'd somehow climbed over his security fence and broken into his house using skills she definitely hadn't learned in finishing school. "You came back," he said, not quite believing she was real. I had to. I couldn't let you think that message was true. Emily swayed on her feet, and Michael caught her before she could fall. Ryan's going to come for both of us now. I've put you in danger just by being here. Let me worry about Ryan. Michael lifted her into his arms, carrying her toward his bedroom. Right now, you need rest. Michael, there are things about me, about my family, that you don't know. Things that change everything. Do you love me? He asked, setting her gently on his bed. Yes, but do you trust me? With my life. Then nothing else matters tonight. Emily searched his face, looking for signs of the anger or betrayal she expected to find. Instead, she saw only love and fierce protectiveness. Whatever he'd discovered about her identity, it hadn't changed how he felt about her. When Michael kissed her, it was with a desperation that matched her own. They both knew this might be their last night together, that whatever came tomorrow would test them in ways they couldn't imagine. But for now, in the safety of his arms, Emily let herself believe that love might be enough to overcome the hatred between their families. They made love with a passion that bordered on desperation, holding each other as if they could prevent the dawn from coming through sheer force of will. Emily had never felt so connected to another person, so completely known and accepted despite all her secrets and lies. When she woke at sunrise, Michael was gone. The note on his pillow was brief. Emergency at the office. Back tonight. We'll figure this out together. Emily was getting dressed when her phone rang. Ryan's voice was calm, almost pleasant. Good morning, sister. I trust you slept well? Emily's blood turned to ice. How did you? I've been watching Harrison's house since yesterday. Imagine my surprise when I saw you climbing over his fence like some common criminal. Ryan's voice hardened. You have 1 hour to come home, Emily. If you're not here by 8 a.m., Michael Harrison will have a very unfortunate accident on his way to work. Emily closed her eyes, feeling the walls close in around her once again. How do I know you won't hurt him anyway? You don't. But I give you my word that as long as you cooperate, he'll live to build his little tech toys for many years to come. The line went dead. Emily stared at Michael's empty bedroom, memorizing every detail. In 1 hour, she would walk back into Ryan's trap, and this time there would be no escape. But Michael would live. That was all that mattered now. Emily Carter had finally found something worth dying for. Michael found the letter when he returned from the office at 7 that evening, propped against the coffee maker where he'd be sure to see it. Emily's handwriting looked rushed, desperate. Michael, I'm sorry for everything. You were right to be suspicious of me from the beginning. I used you for money, for protection, for a place to hide. Whatever you think we had was a lie. I never loved you. I never could love someone like you. Don't try to find me. I'm going back where I belong. Michael read the letter 3 times, his hands shaking with rage. Not at Emily, but at whoever had forced her to write it. Because that's what this was, coercion. Emily Carter might be many things, but after last night, after the way she'd touched him like he was her salvation, he knew she wasn't lying about loving him. Someone had made her write this letter. Someone who wanted Michael to believe she'd betrayed him. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Stop looking for her, or you'll join your parents in the ground. Michael stared at the message, ice flooding his veins. His parents had died in a car accident when he was 12, a tragedy that had shaped every decision he'd made since. What did Emily's disappearance have to do with something that happened 20 years ago? By morning, Michael had made his decision. If someone wanted to play games involving his family's past, he needed professional help. Jennifer Martinez had been Portland's most respected private investigator for 15 years. Her office occupied the top floor of a converted warehouse downtown, all exposed brick and bulletproof glass. Michael had used her services twice before for corporate espionage cases, and her discretion was absolute. Emily Carter, Jennifer repeated, pulling up files on her computer. Daughter of William Carter, CEO of Carter Industries until his death 6 months ago. Officially, she's been traveling in Europe since graduating from Stanford. Unofficially, she disappeared from public view right around the time her father died. Michael leaned forward in his chair. What aren't you telling me? William Carter's death wasn't natural causes like the family claimed. The coroner found traces of digitalis in his system, enough to trigger the heart attack that killed him. But the investigation was shut down before it could go anywhere. Shut down by whom? Ryan Carter. He inherited controlling interest in the company and had enough political connections to make the questions go away. Jennifer's expression was grim. There's more. 3 weeks ago, Emily Carter's trust fund was frozen pending a competency hearing. Ryan's lawyers are claiming she's mentally unstable, possibly suicidal. Michael's hands clenched into fists. He's stealing her inheritance. Looks that way. And if something happened to Emily before the hearing could be resolved, Ryan would inherit everything. What about my parents? Someone just threatened me about them. Jennifer's fingers flew across her keyboard, pulling up accident reports from 2 decades ago. James and Margaret Harrison died in a single-car accident on Highway 26. Their brakes failed going around Devil's Backbone Curve. Michael had heard the story 100 times. His uncle, who'd raised him after the accident, always said it was just bad luck and poor maintenance. But here's what's interesting. Jennifer continued, scrolling through police reports. The same night your parents died, William and Patricia Carter were in a car accident just 5 miles away. They survived, but barely. Both cars had brake failures, both on the same stretch of road. Michael's world tilted sideways. That's not a coincidence. Gets better. Guess who was working as a mechanic at the shop that had serviced both vehicles that week? Jennifer pulled up a 20-year-old employment record. The face in the ID photo was younger, but unmistakably recognizable. Ryan Carter. He was 18, working part-time while going to community college. Had access to both vehicles, knew exactly when they'd be on that road. Jennifer leaned back in her chair. Your parents weren't the target, Michael. They were collateral damage. Ryan was trying to kill the Carters and inherit early, but he only managed to kill your folks. Michael stared at the screen, everything clicking into place. Emily knows. I'd bet money on it. She probably figured it out after her father died, which is why she ran. Jennifer printed out copies of the files. The question is, can you prove it? Not yet, but I know where to start. Michael drove to the Carter estate with Jennifer's files in his passenger seat and a recording device in his jacket pocket. This time, he wasn't leaving without answers. Ryan Carter was waiting for him in the mansion's library, confident and smug behind a massive oak desk. Mr. Harrison, back so soon. I told you Emily wasn't available. I know who you are, Michael said, not bothering with pleasantries. I know what you did to my parents, and I know what you did to your father. Ryan's smile never wavered. I have no idea what you're talking about. Highway 26, 20 years ago. 2 brake failures, same night, same mechanic. Michael pulled out the employment record and slapped it on the desk. You were supposed to kill the Carters and inherit everything. Instead, you got my parents and had to wait 20 years for another chance. Fascinating theory. Completely unprovable, of course. Emily knows the truth. That's why you're keeping her prisoner. Emily is receiving the mental health treatment she desperately needs. She's been having delusions about our father's death, paranoid fantasies about family members trying to harm her. Ryan stood and walked to the window. Very sad, really. The stress of inheriting so much responsibility clearly broke her mind. Michael forced himself to stay calm. Where is she? Safe. Getting the help she needs. I want to see her. That's not possible. Her doctors say any contact with the outside world would be detrimental to her recovery. Michael stood, his patience finally exhausted. You have 24 hours to produce Emily, or I'm going to the FBI with everything I know about your father's murder and my parents' deaths. Go ahead. Ryan's confidence was absolute. You have 20-year-old coincidences and the word of a mentally unstable woman. I have lawyers, political connections, and enough money to make your accusations disappear. We'll see about that. Michael was halfway to the door when Ryan's voice stopped him cold. You know, it really is a shame about your parents. They weren't supposed to be on that road that night. If they'd just minded their own business instead of trying to help the Carters, they'd still be alive today. Michael turned around slowly. What did you just say? Ryan's mask had finally slipped, revealing the cold killer underneath. Your parents saw the Carter car go off the road and stopped to help. If they'd just kept driving, the brake failure on their car wouldn't have mattered. They'd have made it home safely. You just confessed to murdering 4 people. I didn't confess to anything. I merely pointed out that good Samaritans often get themselves killed. Ryan's smile was pure evil. Just like you will if you don't stop meddling in my family's affairs. Michael smiled back, his hand moving to the recording device in his pocket. Thanks for clearing that up. The color drained from Ryan's face as he realized what had just happened. Michael walked out of the Carter mansion with a recorded confession and a new understanding of exactly how dangerous Ryan Carter really was. Emily wasn't just being held prisoner. She was the only witness to multiple murders, and Ryan would kill her before he'd let her testify. Time was running out, and Michael Harrison was done playing by the rules. Jennifer Martinez was going to earn every penny of her fee because Michael was about to wage war on one of Portland's most powerful families. And he was going to win. Emily had been trapped in her childhood bedroom for 4 days when Ryan finally explained his endgame. The room looked exactly as she'd left it at 18. Pink walls, antique furniture, and bars on the windows that Ryan claimed were for security but had always felt like a prison. Now they literally were. "You look beautiful," Ryan said, entering without knocking as 2 women followed behind him carrying garment bags. "Almost like the proper Carter heiress you were born to be." Emily didn't look up from the book she'd been pretending to read. "What do you want, Ryan?" "I want you to try on wedding dresses." The words hit Emily like a physical blow. She slowly closed her book and looked at her half-brother, seeing nothing but cold calculation in his dark eyes. "Whose wedding?" "Yours, of course. This Saturday at the Multnomah Athletic Club. Very exclusive, very elegant. Senator Davis's political friends will be so impressed." Emily's stomach turned. "Robert Davis? The man who's been accused of taking bribes from defense contractors?" Accusations that were never proven and never will be. "Robert is exactly the kind of husband you need, ambitious, connected, and completely under my control." Emily stood slowly, her mind racing. "I'll never marry him." "Actually, you will. Because if you don't, your beloved Michael Harrison will suffer the same unfortunate accident that befell his parents." Ryan's smile was pure poison. Amazing how break failures seem to run in families. "You killed them." The words came out as a whisper. "I eliminated obstacles to my future success. Your parents were supposed to die that night too, which would have saved us all this trouble. But fate had other plans." Emily felt bile rise in her throat. "You were just 18. Old enough to understand that waiting for inheritance was for weak people. I deserve the Carter fortune, not your father and certainly not you. I'm going to tell everyone what you did." Who would believe the word of a mentally unstable woman against a respected businessman, especially when that woman has been receiving psychiatric treatment for paranoid delusions? Ryan gestured to the women with the garment bags. "These ladies are from Portland's finest bridal boutique. They'll help you choose something appropriate for Saturday. I suggest you cooperate, unless you want to walk down the aisle in restraints." After they left, Emily sat on her bed staring at 3 wedding dresses that represented the end of her freedom and possibly her life. Once she was married to Robert Davis, Ryan would control both her inheritance and her vote on the company board. She'd become a puppet in his political games until she was no longer useful. Then she'd have an accident too. Emily waited until after midnight before beginning her search. Ryan had cleared out most of her personal belongings years ago, but he'd missed one crucial hiding place. Behind a loose baseboard near her window, Emily had hidden a spare key to their father's private study. The study was exactly as William Carter had left it: leather furniture, expensive art, and a massive safe hidden behind a painting of the Oregon coast. Emily had watched her father open it countless times over the years, memorizing the combination without really understanding why. Inside the safe, she found documents that made her hands shake with rage and terror. Insurance policies on both her parents and the Harrisons, purchased just weeks before the accident. Bank records showing payments to a corrupt mechanic. And most damning of all, a letter from Ryan to their father, written just days before William's death. "Dad, I know you suspect what really happened 20 years ago. I also know you're planning to change your will to leave everything to Emily. That would be a mistake. Accidents happen to people who make mistakes. Ask the Harrisons." Emily photographed every document with her phone, her heart pounding so loudly she was sure the guards outside could hear it. This was the evidence that would destroy Ryan forever, if she could get it to the right people. She was closing the safe when footsteps echoed in the hallway outside. Emily quickly returned everything to its place and slipped out of the study, making it back to her room just as the guard checked her door. Saturday morning arrived with the suffocating weight of inevitability. Emily sat in front of her vanity mirror while a team of stylists transformed her into the perfect bride for a man she despised. The white silk dress was beautiful and felt like a shroud. "Almost time," Ryan said, appearing in her doorway wearing an expensive tuxedo. Robert's already at the club greeting guests, very excited about his new wife. This is insane, Ryan. You can't force me to marry someone. Actually, I can. Oregon law allows for conservatorship marriages when the bride is mentally incompetent. I have 3 psychiatrists who will testify that you're not capable of making your own decisions. Emily stared at him in horror. You've thought of everything. I've had months to plan. The only variable was Michael Harrison, but he's been dealt with. Emily's blood turned to ice. What did you do? Nothing yet. But he's been asking the wrong questions, getting close to the wrong answers. After today's ceremony, he'll have a tragic accident. Brake failure, most likely. I do enjoy the poetry of it. Emily felt something snap inside her chest. She tried to protect Michael by staying away from him, by letting Ryan believe she was broken and compliant. But her compliance was going to get him killed anyway. I need a moment alone before we leave, she said quietly. Of course, pre-wedding nerves are perfectly natural. Ryan left, locking the door behind him. Emily immediately went to her phone and sent a message to the only person who might be able to help. Multnomah Athletic Club. Forced wedding to Robert Davis. 3 p.m. Evidence in father's safe. Ryan killed everyone. He's going to kill you next. Don't come alone. She sent the message to Jennifer Martinez, the private investigator she'd found in Michael's contacts. If anyone could get word to Michael safely, it would be her. 2 hours later, Emily stood at the altar in the club's main ballroom, her hand trembling as Robert Davis smiled at her with predatory satisfaction. The crowd was small but influential. Politicians, business leaders, and judges who owed Ryan favors. Dearly beloved, the minister began, his voice echoing in the elegant space. Emily barely heard the words. She was scanning the crowd for any sign of rescue, any hope that someone was coming to help her. The ceremony felt like a nightmare, each word of the traditional vows binding her deeper into Ryan's web of control. If anyone objects to this union, speak now or forever hold your peace, the minister said. Emily held her breath, praying for a miracle. The doors at the back of the ballroom burst open. Michael Harrison walked in wearing a black suit and an expression of deadly calm, flanked by 2 FBI agents and followed by a small army of federal marshals. I object, Michael said, his voice carrying clearly across the stunned crowd. On the grounds that the bride is being coerced and the groom is about to marry her under false pretenses. Ryan's face went white as the FBI agents moved toward the altar. This is a private ceremony. You have no authority here. Actually, we do, said the lead agent, pulling out handcuffs. Ryan Carter, you're under arrest for the murders of James Harrison, Margaret Harrison, and William Carter. Emily sagged with relief as Michael pushed through the crowd toward her. Behind them, chaos erupted as guests realized they were witnessing the arrest of one of Portland's most powerful men. How did you know? Ryan snarled as the handcuffs clicked into place. Michael smiled coldly. Your sister is a lot smarter than you gave her credit for, and she's been busy. Emily had never been so happy to see anyone in her entire life. When Michael reached her, she threw herself into his arms, finally safe after months of living in fear. It's over, he whispered against her hair. Ryan can't hurt anyone anymore. Emily looked up at him, seeing love and fierce protectiveness in his blue eyes. How did you find me? Jennifer got your message and called the FBI. They've been building a case against Ryan for weeks based on the evidence we gave them. And the confession you recorded, Emily said with a shaky smile. That helped too. As FBI agents led Ryan away in handcuffs, Emily finally felt the weight of months of terror lifting from her shoulders. She was free, Michael was safe, and the man who destroyed both their families was going to pay for his crimes. But the real victory was standing right in front of her, holding her like she was the most precious thing in the world. Emily Carter had found her way home at last. The arrest should have been the end of it. Ryan Carter led away in handcuffs, his political allies scattering like roaches when the lights came on. Emily had watched the FBI agents escort him from the Multnomah Athletic Club with a satisfaction that felt like justice finally served. She was wrong. The call came at 11 that night, while Emily and Michael were at his house, finally alone after hours of FBI interviews and paperwork. Emily was curled against Michael's side on his couch, wearing one of his sweaters and trying to process that her nightmare was actually over. Harrison, Michael answered his phone, his arm tightening protectively around Emily. Mr. Harrison, this is Agent Williams. I need you and Ms. Carter to get to a secure location immediately. Ryan Carter escaped during transport to the federal courthouse. Emily's blood turned to ice. How is that possible? Coordinated attack on the transport vehicle. 3 agents are in the hospital, and Carter had help from people with serious resources. Agent Williams's voice was grim. We have every reason to believe he's coming for both of you. Michael was already moving, pulling Emily toward his bedroom. How long do we have? Unknown. But he's desperate and has nothing left to lose. We're sending a protection detail, but they won't arrive for 20 minutes. The line went dead. Michael grabbed a gun from his bedroom safe, checking the magazine with practiced efficiency that surprised Emily. You know how to use that? My uncle made sure I could protect myself after my parents died. Guess he was more paranoid than I thought. Michael's expression was granite hard. We're not waiting for the FBI. Too many ways for Ryan to get to us here. They made it to the garage before the lights went out. Emergency lighting kicked in, casting eerie shadows as Michael's security system started blaring warnings. Someone had cut the main power and triggered the perimeter alarms. Back door, Michael whispered, grabbing Emily's hand and pulling her toward the rear of the house. They never made it. Ryan Carter stepped out of the shadows near the kitchen, no longer the polished businessman in expensive suits. His face was bloody from the transport vehicle crash, his clothes torn, and his eyes held the desperate fury of a man with absolutely nothing left to lose. Going somewhere. Ryan's voice was calm, conversational, as if they'd run into each other at a coffee shop instead of a home invasion. Let Emily go, Michael said, positioning himself between them. This is between you and me. Actually, it's between me and 20 years of careful planning that this bitch destroyed in one afternoon. Ryan's gaze fixed on Emily with pure hatred. Do you have any idea what you've cost me? The fortune, the political connections, the life I built? The life you built on murder, Emily said, surprised by the steadiness of her own voice. Your father was weak. He would have run Carter Industries into the ground within 5 years, just like he almost did when he refused to modernize our manufacturing processes. Ryan took a step closer. I saved the company. You poisoned him. I eliminated an obstacle, just like I eliminated the Harrisons when they threatened to expose my plans. Michael's grip tightened on his gun. My parents weren't threats to anyone. They saw me tampering with your father's brakes that night. If they'd reported what they saw, my entire future would have been destroyed. Ryan's smile was empty of any human warmth. So I arranged for them to have their own mechanical problems. You killed 4 people for money. I killed 4 people for power. Money was just the tool. Ryan moved with surprising speed, lunging toward Emily with a knife that appeared from nowhere. Michael stepped into his path, and the 2 men crashed into the kitchen island in a tangle of violence. Emily watched in horror as they fought, Michael trying to bring his gun to bear while Ryan slashed wildly with the blade. Blood splattered across the white marble countertops as both men struggled for control. Call 911, Michael grunted, throwing Ryan against the refrigerator. Emily fumbled for her phone, but Ryan recovered faster than expected. He kicked Michael's legs out from under him and dove for the gun that had fallen during their struggle. Stop! Emily screamed, but Ryan was already raising the weapon toward Michael. The gunshot was deafeningly loud in the enclosed space. Ryan staggered backward, looking down at the spreading red stain on his chest with surprise. Behind him, FBI agent Williams stood in the doorway with his service weapon drawn and smoke still rising from the barrel. Federal agents, drop your weapon. Ryan laughed, a sound that was more animal than human. Too late. I already won. He turned the gun toward Emily, his finger tightening on the trigger. Michael threw himself across the kitchen, tackling Emily to the ground just as Ryan fired. The bullet shattered the window behind them. Ryan tried to fire again, but Agent Williams put 2 more rounds center mass, dropping him permanently. Emily and Michael lay on the kitchen floor for several seconds, both breathing hard and covered in glass from the broken window. Emily could feel Michael's heart hammering against her chest, could smell his cologne mixed with fear and adrenaline. Is it over? She whispered. Michael lifted his head, looking toward where Ryan's body lay motionless in a spreading pool of blood. Yeah, it's over. Agent Williams and his team secured the scene while paramedics checked Emily and Michael for injuries. Minor cuts from the broken glass, bruises from the fight, but nothing serious. He had a complete breakdown, Agent Williams explained as they sat in the back of an ambulance. Lost everything in one day and couldn't handle it. We found evidence at his apartment that he was planning to kill both of you and flee the country. Emily stared at Ryan's body being loaded into the coroner's van, feeling nothing but exhaustion. What happens now? Now you go back to your lives. Carter Industries will need new leadership. The FBI will spend months untangling Ryan's criminal network, and you two get to figure out what comes next. What came next turned out to be a conversation that had been building between them for weeks. They sat on Michael's back patio as dawn broke over Portland, watching the sunrise paint the city in shades of gold and pink. Emily was wearing one of Michael's shirts, her wedding dress from the day before, lying in tatters somewhere in the chaos of the previous night. "I need to tell you something," Emily said, turning to face him. "About us, about our families. I know our companies were competitors. I figured that out weeks ago. It's more than that. Our fathers hated each other with a passion that went beyond business rivalry." Emily took a shaky breath. "When I realized who you were that first night at the hotel, I should have run. Everything I was taught said you were my enemy." Michael reached for her hand, his fingers intertwining with hers. "But you didn't run. I tried to. But then I got to know you, the real you, and nothing my father had told me made sense anymore." Emily's voice cracked with emotion. "I fell in love with you despite everything I'd been taught to believe. Emily, I need you to know that what I feel for you has nothing to do with guilt or gratitude or any kind of complicated psychology. I love you because you're kind and brilliant and you care about people more than profit." Tears streamed down her face. "I love you even though loving you means betraying everything my family stood for." Michael cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs wiping away her tears. "Your family was wrong about mine, just like mine was wrong about yours. We don't have to carry their hatred forward. What if people say we're only together because of the inheritance? Because now that Ryan's gone, I control Carter Industries? Let them talk. I know why I love you, and it has nothing to do with your company or your money." Michael's smile was gentle. "I love you because you're brave enough to fight for what's right, even when it costs you everything. I love you because you make me want to be better than I am." Emily kissed him then, pouring months of fear and longing and hope into the connection between them. When they finally broke apart, the sun was fully up, painting Portland in the warm light of a new day. "So what happens now?" Emily asked. "Now we build something better than what our families left us. Together." Emily looked out at the city where both their families had fought their bitter war, where Ryan's greed had destroyed so many lives. But for the first time in months, she felt hope instead of fear. Michael Harrison and Emily Carter were going to write a different ending to their family's story. One built on love instead of hatred, cooperation instead of competition. It was time to heal the wounds that had festered for too long. 6 months after Ryan Carter's death, Emily stood in the boardroom of what was now called Harrison Carter Technologies, watching lawyers finalize the merger documents that would change everything. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, she could see the Willamette River flowing toward the ocean, carrying away the remnants of winter towards something new. "It's official," announced Patricia Wells, the lead attorney. "Harrison Tech and Carter Industries are now a single entity, with joint CEOs and a new mission statement focused on technological solutions for social problems." Michael squeezed Emily's hand under the conference table. They'd spent months working toward this moment, combining their companies not for profit or market dominance, but to create something their fathers never could have imagined. "What about the foundation?" Emily asked. "The Harrison Carter Foundation for Youth Services is fully established and funded. Your initial endowment of $50 million will allow you to open 5 residential facilities for homeless young adults in the first year alone." Emily felt tears threaten, thinking of all the nights she'd spent on Portland streets, wondering if she'd survive until morning. Now she had the resources to make sure other young people never had to face that terror. "Ryan's assets?" Michael asked. "Liquidated and transferred to victim compensation funds as requested. His political network has been thoroughly dismantled by federal investigators." Patricia's expression was grim. 3 senators and a dozen state legislators are facing corruption charges based on evidence found in his personal files. Emily had testified at Ryan's inquest, revealing everything about his crimes and the evidence she'd gathered. Even in death, he'd managed to take down the corrupt political machine he'd spent years building. After the lawyers left, Emily and Michael stood alone in the conference room that had once belonged to her father. The portraits of previous Carter CEOs had been replaced with photos of the young people their foundation hoped to help. Any regrets? Michael asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind. About merging the companies? Never. Emily leaned back against his chest, watching boats navigate the river below. About Ryan? Sometimes I wonder if things could have been different if someone had gotten him help when he was younger. He made his choices, Emily. You can't save someone who doesn't want to be saved. I know. It's just hard to believe someone I grew up with could become so consumed by greed that he'd kill his own father. Michael turned her around to face him, his blue eyes serious. Ryan's story doesn't get to define yours. You took everything he tried to destroy and turned it into something beautiful. Emily smiled, thinking of the residential facility they'd visited that morning. 15 young adults who'd aged out of foster care now had safe housing, job training, and educational support. The gratitude in their eyes had reminded her why all the pain and loss had been worth it. Speaking of beautiful things, Michael said, reaching into his jacket pocket. I have something for you. Emily's breath caught as he pulled out a small velvet box. They'd talked about marriage, about building a life together, but she hadn't expected a proposal in her father's old boardroom. Emily Carter, Michael said, dropping to one knee beside the conference table. You turned my world upside down from the moment I found you in that storm. You made me believe in love, in hope, in the possibility that people can choose to be better than their worst impulses. Emily's hands flew to her mouth as he opened the box, revealing a stunning emerald ring surrounded by diamonds. I love you more than I thought it was possible to love another person. Will you marry me and help me prove that some love stories really do have happy endings? Yes, Emily whispered, then louder. Yes, absolutely yes. Michael slipped the ring onto her finger with hands that shook slightly. Emily had never seen anything more beautiful than the joy on his face as he stood and kissed her with all the passion and promise of their future together. 3 months later, they were married on Cannon Beach, the Oregon coast stretching endlessly in both directions under a sky painted with sunset colors. Emily wore a simple white dress that flowed in the ocean breeze, while Michael looked impossibly handsome in a dark blue suit that matched his eyes. Their guest list was small: Michael's sister from Boston, a few close friends, and the staff from their foundation who'd become like family. No politicians, no business associates, no one who wanted anything from them except happiness. By the power vested in me by the state of Oregon, said the minister, I now pronounce you husband and wife. When Michael kissed her as the waves crashed behind them, Emily felt like she could finally breathe freely for the first time in her life. No more secrets, no more fear, no more running from who she was or what she wanted. Just love, pure and simple and strong enough to overcome anything. The reception was held at a small inn overlooking the ocean, with local musicians and food from Portland restaurants they discovered together during their courtship. Emily danced with her new husband as the sun set over the Pacific, feeling like the luckiest woman alive. Any regrets about not having a big society wedding? Michael asked as they swayed to a slow song. With 500 people I barely know watching us pretend to be happy? Not a chance. Emily smiled up at him. This is perfect. Wait until you see what I got you for a wedding present. Michael, you already gave me the most beautiful honeymoon in Italy. This is different. Something we can build together. The next morning, he drove her to a piece of property in the West Hills, 50 acres of forested land with views of Mount Hood and the city below. I thought we could build our house here, Michael said, pulling architectural plans from his car. Solar-powered, sustainable materials, space for the kids we'll hopefully have someday. Emily studied the plans, seeing their future laid out in clean lines and open spaces. A home office where they could run their foundation, a library where their children could learn to love reading, gardens where they could grow their own food. It's perfect, she said, meaning it completely. Look at the back section. Emily flipped to the final page and gasped. The plans included a small residential facility, complete with individual apartments and common areas. For young adults aging out of foster care, Michael explained. I thought we could mentor them personally, help them transition to independent living while they're literally in our backyard. Emily threw her arms around him, overwhelmed by his generosity and vision. I love you so much it terrifies me sometimes. Good. I plan to keep surprising you for the next 60 years. 18 months later, Emily stood in the kitchen of their finished home, one hand on her rounded belly as she watched Michael play with the three young adults who'd become their first residents. Sarah was starting community college in the fall, Marcus had landed an apprenticeship with a local electrician, and Jamie was already talking about opening her own bakery someday. "Mrs. Harrison?" Sarah called from the living room. "The baby's kicking again. Want to feel?" Emily laughed, joining them by the fireplace where Michael was teaching Marcus to play chess. This house had become exactly what they'd dreamed, a place where broken people could heal and discover their potential. "What do you think?" Michael asked quietly, his hand joining hers on her belly. "Boy or girl? I don't care, as long as they're healthy." Emily leaned against his shoulder, watching their strange, wonderful chosen family. "Think we're crazy for taking on so much responsibility?" "Completely, but the best kind of crazy." Emily smiled, thinking of how far they'd traveled from that rainy night when she'd been sleeping in doorways and he'd been a lonely workaholic. They'd built something beautiful from the ashes of their family's hatred, proof that love really could conquer anything. Outside their windows, Portland sparkled in the evening light, a city full of people who needed help, hope, and second chances. Emily and Michael Harrison were just getting started. Their love story was no longer about surviving tragedy or overcoming enemies. It was about building a legacy of compassion that would outlast them both. And that was the most beautiful ending of all.